Hello, my name is Samantha, and I am 34 years old. I am the owner of a construction company. Not a giant, not a corporation with hundreds of employees and a staff of lawyers, but an honest, solid firm, grown from my own hands and nerves. It's not huge, but it's mine, and its affairs are stable. Client calls, the hum of machinery, the smell of wet concrete and fresh lumber. In this chaos is my life, my rhythm. I am not married and never have been. Most of my days are spent on construction sites, on calculations, on solving other people's problems, on the team that expects firmness from me, not dreaminess. And to be honest, there's simply no time or energy left for a relationship. My family consists of my parents and a younger sister. My father, Michael, owns a small coffee shop in the city center. It's one of those cozy, lively places where the chairs don't match in shape or color, where every ring on the wooden table is a trace of someone's conversation, and where regular customers come every morning without looking at the menu, knowing their cappuccino will be just the same as always. He has run the coffee shop for 20 years, and in that time, it has become a part of him. Like the smell of freshly ground beans ingrained in his clothes, and the fatigue hidden behind a welcoming smile. My mother, Deborah, doesn't work. She used to help my father, handling the bookkeeping, orders, inventory, but she stopped as soon as I started earning real money. Since then, she has lived easily without thinking about numbers and deadlines. Her day consists of shopping, calls to friends, and evening TV series. My sister, Madison, is 3 years younger than me. She is 31, married to Tyler, a lawyer from a mid-sized firm. They live in the suburbs, in a neat house with white shutters and a lawn where everything is trimmed perfectly, like in an advertisement for family happiness. From the outside, they are perfect. Him in a suit, her in a dress, smiles in the Christmas photos. Perhaps they are truly happy. I try to believe that. And I live on the other side of the city in my own apartment. Not luxury, but a decent place. Brick walls, large windows, quiet in the evenings. Everything I have here was bought with my own hands, literally and metaphorically. I pay for everything myself, which, strangely enough, cannot be said for my family. And no one talks about that over dinner, over a glass of wine, or to the sound of clinking china. But I am the person who pays for their every breath of comfort. Last year, I paid for a family vacation to Hawaii, $15,000 simply because my mother said she had always dreamed of palm trees. Then it was her birthday and a new designer bag, $3,000 for a smile I saw twice, a Christmas trip to Colorado, another $8,000, and the main thing, a major renovation of my parents' house, a new kitchen, bathrooms, roof, heating, air conditioning. Over 2 years, I gave $57,000 to contractors and suppliers. The house they live in stands on my money, on my efforts, on my back. But according to them, I am still the disappointment. They call my company my cute little company, as if I do this between knitting and baking. They laugh that I spend my days among men in hard hats with dirt under my nails. They say construction is no job for a woman, that I will never get married if I mess around with concrete, and that I will die alone. A week before Christmas, I came to my parents to help with decorations. My father asked me to hang the garlands on the porch and around the windows. It was cold, my breath turned to steam, my fingers went numb as I fastened the lights along the gutters. I was standing on the ladder opposite the living room window when I heard voices. The window was slightly open, and the cold air carried every word. It was my mother and Madison. "I just don't want to spend Christmas with that loser," said Madison. I froze, holding the garland. My heart pounded as if everything inside me had suddenly plummeted. "I know, sweetie," my mother replied, "but we need a little patience." "How much longer? The renovation is finished. The house looks perfect. Why do we still have to pretend?" "Tyler says to wait until after the holidays. Then we'll have Samantha pay for the last few things, and after that, we can cut her out of our lives completely. It would be awkward to have a relative like that." I gripped the ladder so tightly my knuckles turned white. The cold metal dug into my palms, and I felt that if I let go, I would not only fall down, but also into the abyss where my world had just collapsed. "And you're sure about the inheritance?" asked Madison, her voice even, almost casual as if discussing a new tablecloth, not someone's life. "Absolutely," my mother replied, her tone weary but confident. "Tyler has almost everything arranged. It will all go to you. Samantha won't even get a whiff." They both laughed, quietly, muffled, like people who have nothing to fear. I climbed down the ladder, trying not to make a sound. My hands moved automatically. I kept hanging the decorations as if performing a simple mechanical task, even though everything inside was turned upside down. My mind, like an overloaded computer, refused to accept what I had heard. They were going to erase me from their lives. After I had rebuilt their house, after I had invested years of labor, nerves, money, they were going to get rid of me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even let my lips tremble. I simply finished hanging the garlands and mentally began planning my next move. A few days later, the Christmas party took place. A family gathering, warm, as they like to say. I arrived on time, as always, with gifts, all beautifully wrapped, with tags and bows. The house shone with newness. The kitchen I had paid for glittered under the lights. My father proudly showed guests around, pointing out the new cabinets and countertops as if they had appeared by his own hand. "Samantha did a great job coordinating," he said, slapping me on the shoulder. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I had ever heard from him. Tyler caught me near the drinks table. "So, Samantha, how's things in your little construction business?" he said with a soft, polite sneer. "Everything's fine," I replied calmly. "You know, real money is made in real estate development," he continued, pouring himself a whiskey. "Construction is just the grunt work, the dirty part. You should think about something more refined." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, looking him straight in the eyes. He smirked and walked away. I served dinner, smiled, laughed at my father's jokes, admired my mother's dress, which I had bought myself. Everything looked perfect, and no one noticed the rage simmering beneath my outward calm. Not a flame, lava, heavy, slow, inevitable. After dinner, my mother, as usual, pleaded tiredness and went to bed. My father fell asleep in front of the TV, snoring in his armchair. Madison and Tyler left around 9. I stayed the night. This raised neither surprise nor questions. I often stayed over so I wouldn't have to drive alone at night. Only this time, I had a reason. When the house fell silent, I got up and went downstairs, barefoot so the floorboards wouldn't creak. The study smelled of paper and coffee. My mother's laptop was on the desk, the screen dark but not locked. She never bothered with passwords. Why would she, in a world where she believed there were no secrets? I turned it on. The white light of the screen hit my eyes, but I didn't look away. I opened the email. My fingers trembled but moved confidently. A few minutes, and I found what I needed. Emails. Hundreds. From Tyler. From my mother. The correspondence had been going on for over a year. They had planned it all in advance. One message, dated 13 months ago, began dryly. "Once the renovation is complete and the house value increases, we can arrange the transfer of the inheritance. Deborah should maintain good relations with Samantha until all the work is paid for and closed." I felt something inside me collapse. The next email from my mother. "How long after the renovation is finished can we stop communicating? I'm tired of pretending to care about her silly construction company." I kept scrolling. Messages, schedules, shopping lists, sums that we need to convince Samantha to pay. Even a payment schedule, as if I were their personal bank. They discussed every detail, from the cost of the roof repair to how to gently steer me into paying for the air conditioning system. My mother wrote, "If we say we can't manage without her help, she'll agree. She always agrees." Tyler replied, "After the holidays, we can move to the next phase. The main thing is not to show any irritation." Then I stumbled upon something else, a separate email thread I hadn't even noticed at first, between my mother and someone signed simply with the letter D. Curiosity overpowered fear, and I opened the first email. There was nothing explicit in it. A couple of phrases, friendly, almost harmless. But as I opened the next one and then another, the mask of harmlessness crumbled. My mother was having an affair, a long, hidden, years-long affair, with David, my father's friend from college. He was always hovering around, appearing at family holidays, bringing wine, joking, paying my father compliments about the coffee shop, and my mother about her impeccable taste. I had never looked at him twice. I should have. Their letters were full of promises and lies. They discussed how hard it was to live a double life, how Michael had become a stranger, how they were waiting for the right moment. Hundreds of lines soaked in fake tenderness and calculation. They dreamed of a new life together, a house by the sea, freedom paid for with my money. In one email from David, I read, "Once the inheritance matter is settled and everything with Michael is taken care of, we can finally be together for real." I reread that phrase 3 times. Taken care of. Michael. Taken care of. As if he were not a person, but an old piece of furniture to be removed to make space for the new. My mother's reply was even more terrifying. "I can't wait. Thanks to Samantha's money, this house is now worth much more. Madison will get everything, and we will start over." Start over. Start over. Without me, without my father, without shame. I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the cold light of the monitor, my lungs constricted as if the air had become thick and viscous. Inside, everything froze, turned to stone, became ice. They hadn't just cut me out. They had robbed, betrayed, destroyed their own family, all under the whisper of false words and fake smiles around the holiday table. I started taking screenshots, one after another, every email, every message, every piece of evidence. I collected them with the cold focus of a surgeon. Then I uploaded everything to a secure cloud, sent copies to my own email address, in case someone decided to accidentally erase the traces. When everything was saved, I closed the laptop. The metallic click of the lid sounded almost like a verdict. I went upstairs and went to bed. Sleep was impossible. I heard the old house creaking, the heating humming, the wind rattling the shutters. But these sounds seemed distant, as if I were already living in another world. By morning, I had a plan. I woke at dawn, quietly gathered my things, left a note on the kitchen table, short, meaningless, and left while my parents were still asleep. The cold air hit my face, but I felt a strange relief, as if I had taken my first breath after a long dive. I went straight from the suburbs to the city center, to a lawyer. I had found a name online, Robert Chen, a specialist in family and property law. He saw me that same morning. His office was impersonal. Gray walls, stern shelves, the smell of coffee and paper. I laid out everything before him, the flash drive, printouts, bank statements, receipts for the renovation, everything. He leafed through the documents for a long time, then took off his glasses, folded his hands, and looked at me with something close to pity. "This is an unpleasant situation, to put it mildly," he said, "but legally the house belongs to your parents. You didn't sign any contracts stating that your investments gave you ownership rights or a share. Everything you did is considered a gift." "Even if they used me deliberately?" I asked. "That's a different matter." He paused. "You may have grounds for a fraud lawsuit, especially given the correspondence about the inheritance and the vacation fund transfers, but it will be a long process and painful." I thanked him, though the words came with difficulty. I left the office not defeated, but as if scorched, yet alive. If the law couldn't get my money back, I would at least make sure the truth came out. I still had spare keys to my parents' house, the ones they had given me just in case. They didn't know I had kept them. 2 days later, when my parents were out on errands, I returned. The house was empty, quiet. I put on gloves, not out of fear, but out of habit of being careful. On the living room table, I laid out the devices I had bought, tiny voice-activated recorders. They could work for weeks without giving themselves away by sound or light. I placed one behind the frame of a painting in the living room, a second in a kitchen cabinet between the dishes and a coffee can, a third I hid in my parents' bedroom in a decorative box on my mother's dresser. I checked that everything was working and left, locking the door as if nothing had happened. For the next 3 weeks, I returned discreetly to check the recordings. Most were painfully boring. My father talking about the coffee shop, my mother discussing recipes and shopping with friends, voices, laughter, ordinary life. But I listened, patiently, because I knew, sooner or later, the truth would speak for itself. I compiled a detailed spreadsheet, methodically, point by point, listing every dollar that had ever gone into my parents' house. Columns of numbers stretched out like a dry accounting confession. New kitchen cabinets, $8,000. Bathroom renovation, $12,000. Roof replacement, $15,000. Heating and air conditioning system, $11,000. Paint, flooring, plumbing, electrical work, light fixtures, every little thing, every receipt, every contractor's signature. Total sum, $57,450. I had all the proof. Invoices, bank statements, correspondence with contractors, payment orders. Paper doesn't lie. People do, but numbers don't. 3 weeks had passed since I installed the recording devices. Long, drawn-out weeks during which I learned patience. And then, finally, I struck gold. On one of the recordings from the living room, I heard voices. Madison and my mother. Their conversation was so clear, it was as if they were standing right next to me. I listened, sitting in my apartment with headphones on, holding my breath. I had to listen twice to believe I hadn't misheard. Madison's voice was brisk, confident. Tyler has finished all the paperwork. The documents are ready to be filed. Now that the renovation is complete, we have full legal grounds to cut Samantha out. My mother's laugh, bright, pleased, like someone for whom everything is finally falling into place. Perfect. I've already updated the will. Everything goes to you. The house, the savings, everything. Samantha won't get a thing. What about Dad? Asked Madison, a note of curiosity in her voice, as if discussing a to-do list item, not a person's fate. What about him? My mother replied coldly. Once the assets are transferred, I'm starting a new life with David. He's been waiting for me. Does Dad suspect anything? Not at all. He hasn't really noticed me in years. We're just 2 people under one roof. He won't even realize it until it's too late. Then they both laughed lightly as if sharing good news. Poor Samantha, Madison said. After all that work, she won't even get a whiff of the money. At least she can keep our old father company. I listened, and my hands trembled. My fingers clenched the headphones until my knuckles turned white. This was it, the end, the final nail in the coffin of their carefully constructed lie. I saved the recording, made copies, sent the file to the cloud, to an external drive, and to a USB stick, which I put in a safe. Everything had to be insured against any accident. In 2 weeks, it was Madison's birthday. Traditionally, the celebration was held at our parents' house, with cake, dinner, relatives, and showy merriment. I knew this was my chance. For 2 weeks, I dedicated myself to preparation. Every evening after work, I opened my laptop and compiled everything into one system. Emails, statements, photos, screenshots. I created a presentation on my tablet where everything was laid out clearly, as in a court, from the first transaction to the last email, from words to voices. When the living room recording played, the silence in the room turned into a knife. I rehearsed in front of the mirror, how I would stand, how I would start speaking, how I wouldn't let my voice tremble. I knew I had no right to show weakness, but there was another part of the plan. David, or rather his wife, Karen, a woman I had only seen a few times at holidays, calm, pleasant, the one who always brought homemade pie and smiled, unaware that her husband was cheating on her with my mother. I found her address, an old one, in the suburbs where everything was the same. Green lawns, flags on the porches, identical mailboxes by the road. I compiled all of David's and my mother's emails, made a selection, and sent it to her. No comments, no threats, no explanations, just the facts. Let her read it for herself. Let her draw her own conclusions. She didn't reply, not a word. But from the delivery notification, I knew. The letter had been opened, and that was enough. Madison's birthday arrived. I woke up before the alarm. The house was silent, like before a storm. I took a shower, turned on the light, and took out my business suit, the one I usually wore for investor meetings. A black jacket, a crisp white shirt, trousers with sharp creases. I pulled my hair into a sleek bun. The person looking back at me in the mirror was not going to a family party, but to a courtroom. When I drove up to my parents' house, the sun was already setting. Relatives' cars were lined up along the curb. A festive banner hung on the porch, along with garlands. Laughter came from inside. My mother opened the door. "Samantha?" Her gaze slid over my suit. "You're so dressed up. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I replied evenly, as if discussing something mundane. "I just came from a client meeting." She held my gaze for a moment as if searching for something in my face, then nodded and stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled of dinner. Something fried, warm, spicy, familiar and alien at the same time. The dining room was already set. A white tablecloth, glasses, candles. My father was bustling in the kitchen, cutting appetizers, focused, as always, when he wanted everything to be perfect. In the living room, on the sofa, sat Madison and Tyler. Their heads were bent over their phones, fingers swiftly scrolling. "Hey, sis," Madison said, not looking up. "Nice suit." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice calm. I took a seat at the head of the table. This was unusual. Normally, my father sat there, but this time, no one objected. My mother walked past, adjusting napkins with her habitual smile. Tyler crossed his legs, glancing at his watch. Madison lazily scrolled through her feed. The atmosphere was deceptively serene, like before a storm. We waited for my father to finish in the kitchen. We chatted about nothing, the weather, traffic, a new cafe that had opened downtown. The laughter sounded superficial, the words like empty shells. My father brought out the dishes, fragrant and generous, and finally everyone sat down. Madison was radiant. Her birthday, the attention, the gifts. She talked about how she and Tyler were planning a vacation, how they had already found a house by the ocean. She laughed brightly, easily, like someone who had everything under control. When the plates were full and the glasses filled with wine, I stood up. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, holding my glass. Everyone turned to me. Madison squinted, smiling. My mother looked slightly wary. "To family," I said, "to loyalty and truth." My mother's laugh died mid-breath. The color drained slightly from her face, but she raised her glass. "Of course," she said, "to family." I set down my glass, picked up my tablet from the table. "Actually, before we start dinner, I want to show you something." Tyler frowned, leaning back in his chair. "Samantha, maybe later. It's Madison's birthday." "No," I said firmly. "This can't wait." I walked over to the TV hanging on the wall. My father had installed it himself a year ago, boasting about its new smart features. I connected my tablet and the screen came to life. "What are you doing?" My mother's voice was sharp, prickly. I pressed play. The room filled with voices. My own voice wasn't needed now. From the speakers came Madison's voice, confident, clear. "Tyler has finished all the paperwork. The documents are ready to be filed. Now that the renovation is complete, we have full legal grounds to cut Samantha out." Then, my mother's laugh, light, pleased. "Perfect. I've already updated the will. Everything goes to you." The silence in the room thickened like smoke. No one breathed. Even the sounds from the kitchen, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, seemed to vanish. I didn't stop the recording. Let them listen. Let them hear themselves. Every word, every phrase, every pause between laughs. When it ended, I looked up. My mother had turned white as a sheet. Madison stared at the table, her gaze glassy. Tyler sat frozen with his phone in his hand, as if he didn't know what to do with it. My father sat motionless, not blinking, staring at the screen. "That's not all," I said calmly. "Let me show you the rest." I swiped the tablet screen. Screenshots appeared before everyone, emails, text messages. "Here's the correspondence between Mom and Tyler," I explained. "Here they discuss the timing and details of the inheritance transfer. Here, a conversation about how to best cut me out before it's too late. All in black and white." My father slowly raised his head. "I don't understand," he said hoarsely. "What does this mean?" "Let me explain," I replied. "Here is a spreadsheet. This is every dollar I spent on your house." Rows and sums appeared on the screen. New kitchen, new bathrooms, roof, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Total sum, $57,450. I have all the receipts. Tyler was feverishly typing something on his phone. I smirked. Too late. All the data is saved in multiple locations. You won't be able to delete anything. I switched to the next slide. And here are the bank statements. My fingers didn't tremble. Here you can see how Mom took the $20,000 I transferred for the family vacation and moved it to a secret account. My mother jumped up. This is a misunderstanding. Samantha, you're taking everything out of context. My father looked up at her. His voice was low, even, devoid of any emotion, which made it sound more terrifying than a scream. Sit down, Deborah. She froze, then slowly sank back into her chair, as if her legs could no longer hold her. I opened the next set of screenshots, my heart beating so steadily and calmly, as if what was happening wasn't to me. And here's something else, I said, scrolling through the images. Mom has been having an affair for many years. I pulled up a new email on the screen, and the air in the room grew thick, as if the oxygen had suddenly been sucked out. This is her correspondence with David, I continued. You know, Dad, your old friend from college. The name hung in the silence like a bell toll. My father jerked his head up, his eyes narrowing as if trying to see the trick. They've been together for a long time, I added. They plan to start a new life after the inheritance was transferred to Madison. My father's face began to slowly redden, as if blood were boiling under his skin. He stood up abruptly. His chair scraped back with a crash, hit the floor, and overturned. 30 years, he exhaled in a trembling voice. 30 years of marriage, and you're sleeping with David, my best friend. Michael, please, my mother began, but he didn't let her finish. All this renovation. His voice grew louder, denser, as if the room couldn't contain his anger. It was for him, wasn't it? You were renovating our house to live here with him? That's not true, my mother cried out, but he didn't even look at her. He turned to me. Show me the messages, all of them. I silently handed him the tablet. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the emails, each new message burning deeper into his gaze. I saw the muscles in his face twitch, his breathing grow heavier. With every line, a whole world seemed to be collapsing inside him, the one he had built over decades. You stole from our daughter, he said finally, dully, hoarsely. Stole her money. Planned to steal the inheritance, too. And all the while, you were going to leave me with nothing, run off with David. My mother was crying now. Her voice was choked, her eyes swollen. You never paid any attention to me, Michael. All you cared about was that stupid coffee shop and your old habits. I was lonely, don't you understand? Lonely. My father clenched his fingers on the edge of the dining table. It was the same table I had once ordered from craftsmen, made from old reclaimed oak, choosing every detail with love. At that moment, it seemed to me a symbol of the family's strength. He lifted the table as if it weighed nothing and flipped it over with force. A deafening crash followed. Plates shattered, food scattered across the floor, glasses smashed, wine spreading in crimson stains across the tablecloth and parquet. The air smelled of metal, wine, and pain. My mother screamed. Madison grabbed Tyler's arm, her eyes darting between our parents like a cornered animal. I remained seated, just watched, without fear, without surprise, as if I had seen it all before, in my thoughts, in a dream, on those evenings when I had imagined this moment. My father stood amidst the chaos, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. His eyes were bloodshot, but not from malice, from betrayal, from a loss that couldn't be measured. Then he turned sharply and left the room. I heard his footsteps going up the stairs. 1, 2, 3. Then a door slammed upstairs. The house shuddered. Madison and Tyler exchanged glances. We're leaving, Tyler said quietly, taking their coats. They hurried to the door without looking back. And so I was left alone with my mother. The dining room was in ruins, as after a storm. Shards of glass glittered in the chandelier's light like ice chips. Food lay trampled on the floor, pieces of cake stuck to the carpet, drops of wine seeped into the wood. The overturned table lay on its side like a fallen giant. My mother sat, staring into emptiness. Her makeup was smeared, tears carving paths down her cheeks. "You ruined everything," she whispered. "You destroyed this family." I stood up, took my tablet from the edge of the sofa. "No, Mom," I replied calmly. "You destroyed it. With your greed, your lies, and your manipulations. I just made sure everyone learned the truth." "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered, looking at the floor as if I could offer her salvation. "That's not my problem anymore," I said quietly and walked towards the exit. I walked carefully, avoiding the shards, as if each step separated me from the past. The hallway smelled of cold and wine. I put on my coat, closed the door behind me. Outside, it was calm. The air was clean, fresh, as after a thunderstorm. I got into my car, turned on the headlights, and drove out of the yard. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No nightmares, no obsessive thoughts about whether I should have acted differently. Not a shred of regret, only emptiness and long-awaited peace. I didn't check my phone for almost 2 weeks. I didn't want to. I didn't need to. I threw myself completely into work. My construction company finally gained momentum. 3 major projects were running simultaneously. 12-hour days on site, meetings with clients, selecting materials, supervising crews. Everything was under my control. I felt alive again, not a daughter, not a victim, but a person who had built her own foundation, solid, reliable, and finally, her own. When I finally looked at my messages, the screen glowed with 14 names. 14 attempts by my mother to regain control. The first lines were full of reproach and fury. "How dare you disgrace us like that? You had no right to air our private matters. You are a terrible daughter." Those words burned, but I already knew that the truth is not a disgrace. Then came the justifications, familiar and petty. "You don't understand the whole situation. There were reasons for everything we did." And finally, the last messages, like a moan, a plea. "Please call me. We need to talk. I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me." I looked at these lines for a long time, reading them over and over, trying to understand where all this weakness had suddenly come from. There was no answer. I typed one short message and sent it. "I have filed for a restraining order. I want nothing to do with any of you. Do not contact me again." After that, I blocked her number. The feeling of relief was even, like a cold morning. Messages came from Madison, too. 5 short apologies. "I'm so sorry, Samantha. I made a terrible mistake." In one, she offered help, said Tyler had legal connections, he could provide free assistance for my business, said we could fix things that way. It was an unpleasant wink at fate, an attempt to buy silence or loyalty. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded all the correspondence to my lawyer and asked him to prepare a restraining order, a measure to protect me from their attempts at manipulation and intrusion. And then came one message from my father. It was simple and heavy at the same time. "Samantha, I need the evidence of your mother's infidelity for the divorce proceedings. Can you send me copies of the messages? I am so sorry for everything. I should have protected you." I sent him everything I had, the emails, screenshots, audio recordings, bank statements, the entire carefully collected archive. He replied briefly, "Thank you. I am filing for divorce. I will take care of you." I didn't thank him. I had already learned to take care of myself. The case moved quickly. The divorce proceeded without long delays. My father had all the necessary evidence, the correspondence with David, the money transfers, the letters about the inheritance transfer, the recorded conversations. It all landed on the table and formed the basis for action. His lawyer was a man without pity. He neatly, methodically, and harshly presented the facts. The court did not tolerate the lies and deception. My mother lost a significant portion of the savings, half of the joint account. The house remained with my father. The coffee shop, with its familiar mornings and chairs, remained his too. All the material foundation of the life my father had built over the years remained his, as it should have been. My mother had to move away. I learned from my father's lawyer that she had moved into a small, cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city, with thin walls and sad plumbing. I didn't feel sorry for her. No nightmares, no pity. Just a cold acceptance of circumstances. She had chosen lies and calculation herself. The consequences came quickly. My father, however, was devastated. Not because the woman was gone, but because his entire world, where he had trusted and loved, was shattered. 30 years of his life had turned out to be part of someone else's game. His wife in the arms of his best friend, one daughter weaving cunning plans to cut him out of the other daughter's inheritance. He had trusted people, he had believed, and in return, betrayal. The pain wasn't in the sum of the losses, but in the fact that those he had cherished and to whom he had given his heart had used his openness for their own gain. A month after the divorce was finalized, his lawyer called me with news that brought a cautious sense of relief to my chest. My father had rewritten his will, and now, like a snowball, everything he had ever earned and cherished, formally and legally, passed to me. The house, the familiar coffee shop on the corner that smelled of coffee, all the small things and papers that make up a person's life. Madison was cut out, as if pages from an old book, because she had known about the affair and had covered for my mother and David, had been complicit and silent, and that was the final straw after which even my father's patience had run out. He sent me a short message after the documents were finalized. "Samantha, I am so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you. Let me try." These words were simple and heavy, like a stone someone had carefully placed on my chest and asked me to breathe around it. In this message was an acknowledgement of his mistake, and at the same time, a request for a chance to start differently. And I, remembering his tired but warm smile and the smell of freshly ground coffee on his hands, agreed to meet him at the coffee shop he had kept all his life. The meeting was awkward. We sat opposite each other, holding paper cups of warm coffee and sandwiches, and for the first time in many months, the silence between us wasn't burdensome. It was cautious, like a thin wall through which we were trying to see each other. My father said, "I'm so sorry," in a way that made the steel cable of male pride in his voice tremble. And we talked for a whole hour not about betrayal and rupture, but about mundane things, about the coffee shop, about funny incidents with regular customers, about my work plans, about a new type of floor tile I wanted to test in a project. These simple, even conversations became a comfort to us. In the end, we agreed to meet again in a month, at the same place and time for lunch, and so turned these dates into a habit, a small vow. Once a month in the coffee shop, at the table by the window that smelled of pastries and old paper, we talked about life, plans, and work, carefully avoiding the topics that still tasted too bitter on the tongue. These were no longer the warm, uncomplicated relationships that had existed before, but in all this, however modest, there was honesty, and that was a lot. 3 months after that fateful Christmas night, I bought a new house. This time it wasn't just a corner in an apartment building, but a real house with a small, tidy yard and a garage. A quiet neighborhood with well-kept lawns and tall maples. A neighborhood that, even though I had no plans for children, seemed a cozy and right choice for living. A place where you could leave the door unlocked and not fear for the next day. The house had a spare bedroom, and I set it up as a study. I put in a drafting table, bought a solid desk and a comfortable chair, hung a lamp facing south, filled the walls with shelves for projects and reference books, so that now, returning from the site in the evenings, I could calmly close the door behind me, sit down to work, and not think about others' demands, expectations, or reproaches. My business went better than ever. Without the constant family burdens and unexpected ask her to help requests, I was able to reinvest funds into the firm's development, hired 2 project managers, bought more professional equipment, optimized supply logistics, and established a quality control process. So now I wasn't just completing projects, but building a reputation, and clients paid honestly and on time, without reproaching me for family debts. I no longer knew where my mother lived, wasn't interested in her address in that cheap apartment with thin walls, didn't seek out Madison or check if she was still with Tyler. I consciously severed those threads. They were not part of my new life, and that was liberating, like a clean slate. With my father, we maintained our simple but important habit, our monthly lunches at his coffee shop, sometimes chatting about the possibility of opening another location, sometimes arguing about coffee varieties, sometimes discussing my finicky client who didn't want to approve the blueprints. He never brought up my mother or Madison unless I asked, and I didn't ask because words about the past sounded too fragile and could shatter this new thing growing between us. My phone was silent. No demands for money, no reproaches about my choices, no more manipulations. The silence turned out not to be an emptiness, but a space for growth. This became my life, my house, my business, my choice, without others' interference, without obligations that imposed guilt and shame. No one else's plans for me, no one else's expectations, only my own decisions and my own desires. For the first time in 34 years, that was enough. I didn't need their approval, their warmth, or their recognition to feel that my efforts had meaning and that my future was not a continuation of their scenarios, but my own path. I had successes I had achieved on my own and projects I continued to implement methodically, one after another, day after day. I knew I could build all this without their participation and, more importantly, without their permission. And so I kept moving forward, maintaining the rhythm of work and life, project by project, one day at a time, not looking back at the family that, in essence, had never truly seen me.